Chapter 5. Woohoo! At long last, it was time for the Leviathan to be processed. The guild informed me where the project would be carried out shortly before it was set to begin, and as expected, they'd ended up choosing the plains outside the capital. Willem's prediction had been spot on. What I found when I arrived at the plain, however, was something I was a little less prepared for. Oh, wow! Now that's a crowd. A veritable army of adventurers, guild members and associates were already hard at work by the time we got there. Much to my astonishment, there was even a seating area set up nearby featuring some very fancy-looking chairs. What am I even looking at? I thought, stunned by how much bigger this endeavor had turned out to be compared to what I'd been imagining. All I'd wanted was for them to butcher the thing, and I seriously couldn't understand how it had all gotten so blown out of proportion. I spent a good long while staring around in utter bewilderment. Oh, you finally made it, huh? Until Willem, who'd gone off on his own earlier that morning, caught sight of me and came over to say hello. Guildmaster, I muttered. What's got you looking so perturbed, Mukouda? Willem asked. Well, I mean, what's that all about? I asked, pointing at the lavish seating section. Oh, that. Willem casually replied. That's where the king and queen'll be watching from. It's what? Come on, don't give me that. An opportunity to see a Leviathan in person is a once-in-a-lifetime event, and that's only if you get very lucky. It'd be a miracle if people didn't take an interest in the butchering of a monster like that. Okay, but the king and queen? Don't they have something more important to be doing? You can't be serious. You know they're here for you as much as they're here for the Leviathan, right? If a Fenrir, an ancient dragon, and the adventurer they serve are taking part in something like this, then there's no way the king could ignore it. And that's not even starting on the gifts you gave them. You got their attention after that, no question about it. Ugh, I really should have toned those gifts down after all. Seems a lot of the local nobles asked to watch as well. Hence, well, all that, Willem added, gesturing at the seating again. Apparently, that was why the seats were so over-the-top fancy. Oh, no. A whole crowd of nobles is gonna be here. Seriously. I sighed deeply. Suck it up and deal with it. This is what you get for dropping a damn Leviathan on our doorstep, Willem said as he patted me on the shoulder. You're not wrong, but if I had it my way, we never would have done this at all. Don't blame me, blame the people who insisted that we had to eat the stupid thing, no matter how much trouble it would take to make it happen. I shot Fel, Gan, Dora-chan, and Sway a glare and got a flat what from Fel in response. They had no idea what I was mad about. Just then, I spotted a figure off in the distance. Whoever it was, they were sprinting in my direction at full speed, waving their arms in the air like a maniac. Mukouda. Oh, boy. Here we go. That's Elrond, all right, I groaned as I confirmed that the figure was exactly who I'd feared it would be. I felt my eye twitch involuntarily. Mukouda. It's been far, far too long. I just arrived in the capital a moment ago, and here you are, exactly where I was hoping I'd find you. I can't believe I ran into you this quickly. It really must be destiny at work, Elrond declared with a beaming smile. First, please stop talking like that, it's weirding me out, and second, we both know that isn't true. You were looking forward to seeing Gun and Dora-chan, not me, I countered. Oh no. The freaks finally found us. Dora-chan bitterly moaned. He said it telepathically, of course, so Elrond couldn't hear him, but if the elf had been able to hear it, I had a feeling he would have broken down in tears. Ooh. I see his penchant for incessant blather hasn't changed at all, Gun groaned. He spoke telepathically as well, presumably since he was afraid that speaking out loud would mean that Elrond would talk to him next. Elrond, completely oblivious to the dragon duo's telepathic ribbing, was as hyped as I'd ever seen him. He looked like he might start dancing a jig at any second. Oh, well, I guess I can't deny it. Heh. I nearly succumbed to despair at the thought that I wouldn't get to see them for the longest time, but then fortune fell upon me like a bolt from the blue. And to think that opportunity came in the form of a Leviathan. You actually remembered what I told you, didn't you, Mukouda? Elrond said, grinning from ear to ear as he grabbed my hand and shook it altogether too vigorously. You have no idea how lucky you are to not hear what those dragons are saying about you right now. If only you knew how much they hated you. I mean, not to burst your bubble, but it's really not like we went out and found a Leviathan specifically for you. Also, can you let go of my hand now? I asked, uncomfortably aware of how strained my own expression was starting to look. Elrond ignored me. Oh, you, ever the jokester, he said. Of course you remembered. You can't possibly expect me to believe you stumbled across a Leviathan and slew it by chance, now, can you? No, seriously, that's actually what happened. You're totally off base. How many times do I have to repeat myself before you believe that I didn't do this for you? We decided to go into a dungeon on a whim and just happened to find one that can finished off for me. Oh, I'm sure, Elrond said, still smiling as brightly as ever, even in the face of my complete and unambiguous denial. Nope. It's hopeless. His brain is protected by an impenetrable shell of positivity. Then, as I shook my head with exasperation. Stop. Right. There. Don't you dare run off on me ever again. An old woman came bursting onto the scene, bellowing at full volume and charging in our direction with a look of pure fury on her face. Elrond yelped. His grin and his boundless reserves of manic energy vanished in the blink of an eye. The old woman rushed over to us, then paused to gasp and heave for a few seconds. I could see now that she was also an elf, and that she'd probably been quite the beauty when she was younger. You imbecile. Why would you sprint off to who knows where without a word of warning? The elven woman raged. You've got some nerve to try to slip away from your supervisor. No, that wasn't my intention in the slightest. Elrond frantically stammered. Me. I don't believe a word of it, and conveniently enough, the guild authorities who dispatched me to watch over you are all within arm's reach at this very moment. I'm sure they'll be very interested in hearing all about this little stunt of yours. In fact, they might even be so impressed by your behavior that they'll ask me to keep you company for even longer. Elrond wailed, falling to his knees on the spot. Me. A punishment well earned, the elven woman said as she shot him a very chilly glare. Okay, I think I'm getting the picture. She must be the person who Ugol said got sent to watch over Elrond. I think he said her name was Moira. I take it you would be Mukouda, the elven woman asked. Why yes, I am, I replied. Then you have my apologies for the trouble that this feckless idiot has caused you. My name is Moira, and I've been entrusted with the task of supervising him. If he ever does anything untoward again, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Understood. I'll do that, thanks, I said. It seemed I'd gained a powerful ally in the battle against Elrond's worst impulses. I'd most definitely be taking her up on her offer the next time he pulled some stupid stunt or another. Wait, Mukouda, Elrond yelped. Quiet, you, Moira snapped, punctuating her order with a sharp slap to Elrond's head. Yap. Moira's a toughie, all right. I can't believe it. You hit me, Elrond whined. Me. Moira indignantly snorted. You've no one but yourself to blame. You should have long since learned how to behave in a way that doesn't earn you that sort of punishment. Have you forgotten why you're here in the first place? Of course I haven't. I'm here to butcher the Leviathan and to see Ganon Dora-chan, of course. I winced. The look on Elrond's face made it pretty clear he thought that was the obvious answer, and I had a feeling he was about to regret not giving it just a little more consideration. You're here for the Leviathan and only the Leviathan, you dullard, Moira shouted, slapping Elrond upside the head once again. Oh, stop hitting me, please. I'll be glad to, as soon as you stop spouting your idiocy. Come along, we have somewhere to be. Wait, where? Surely you can guess. You don't think you could cause that much trouble for the guild's administration and not pay its leaders a visit when you find yourself in the capital? No, No excuses. Go on, move. Moira grabbed Elrond by one of his lengthy ears and dragged him off into the distance. Oh, that hurts. Moira, stoop, he wailed. Goodbye, and good luck with that, I thought, waving as I watched Elrond get carted off to who knew where. Looks like we'll be fine leaving him to that old elf lady, Dora-chan commented. He was clearly relieved to see the dynamic that had developed between Elrond and his new keeper. Indeed. A relief, truly, Gunn agreed. Is the butchering of the Leviathan not ready to begin yet? Asked Fell, who'd been sitting quietly off to the side, scowling. I guess not. I haven't heard anything, anyway, I replied. I'd have to take the corpse out of my item box before they could butcher it, needless to say, and nobody had asked me to do that yet. Sway wants to try the Leviathan meat soon, Sway commented. Apparently, everyone was beside themselves with excitement. I'll go ask the people from the Capital's Guild about the schedule, I said. Checking with one of the people responsible for directing the flow of work seemed like the quickest and easiest way to get brought up to speed on the schedule. I was looking around for a likely candidate when suddenly, a voice rang out. Is that you, Mukouda? It's been ages. Wait, Rita, I exclaimed as I turned around. Rita, a member of the adventuring party Iron Will, was standing behind me with a smile on her face. She wasn't alone either, a whole assortment of familiar figures who I hadn't seen since we ran into each other in Dolan's dungeon were gathered up alongside her. All of you. It really has been forever. Werner, Ramon, Vincent, Rita, and Franca. Iron Will's whole lineup were present. I felt a smile spread across my face as well. Oh, did the guild call you in to help? I asked. I'd almost forgotten that they sent out a summons for high-ranking adventurers. That's right, Werner said with a nod. We happened to already be in the capital, so we were actually the first party they asked. We knew we had to lend a hand the second they mentioned your name, Ramon added, flashing me a grin. That struck me as awfully nice of them. By the way, Mukouda, I see you've picked up another crazy familiar, Werner added as he glanced behind me. Ramon, Vincent, Rita, and Franca all nodded in agreement. I didn't even need to ask to know they were talking about Gunn. Yeah, well, you know. It kinda just happened, I said. You're the only person in the world who could just happen to get an ancient dragon as a familiar. That's incredible. Downright absurd, actually, Vincent said. Once again, the other members of Iron Will nodded vigorously. I guess. But he joined up for the same reason Fell did, I explained, doing my best to keep smiling. In the end, all it really means is that I've got one more extremely hungry mouth to feed. You mean he got lured in by your cooking? Rita asked. Indeed. The food that my liege cooks is like nothing else, and is a reward worthy of my service. Gah. It talk. Rita yelped. Gunn had jumped in to answer her question for me. Yeah, I guess I should introduce you. This is my party's newest member, Old Man Gunn, I said. Iron Will's members responded by breaking eye contact with me. Their shoulders were slightly quivering. What? No, seriously, what? Oh, gods, my sides, Vincent muttered. But anyway, didn't Fell say something about how he picked a fight with an ancient dragon at one point? Don't tell me Old Man Gunn is the same one from that story, he asked. I was a little surprised that he still remembered. Hardly, Fell grunted. He chose to provoke me. For the time being, however, we have agreed to a truce. We are allies, for now. Indeed we are, Gunn agreed. Oh, Vincent said. He seemed weirdly excited by the news. A Fenrir and an ancient dragon, fighting together? Just imagine the possibilities. It's the ultimate team-up. I bet you're unbeatable. Okay, hold up a sec, pal. Don't go forgetting that we're on the team, Dora-chan chimed in. Sway's here too. Sway added as well. The two of them leaped in front of Vincent, more or less shoving themselves in his face. Whoa! Vincent yelped. Oh, right. I almost forgot you had a tiny dragon and a slime working with you too. I know Fel and Gun kinda overshadow everyone, but Dora-chan and Sway are plenty powerful in their own right, I noted. Powerful enough to take down S-ranked monsters, anyway. And the two of them joined up with you for your food as well? Rita asked. I mean, yeah, I admitted. Well, if that's what it takes to eat your cooking every day, I can't exactly blame em. I'm actually jealous, she said. Foolish girl, Ramon angrily muttered. We are no fledgling adventurers who live from hand to mouth. He's right, Rita, Werner concurred. When was the last time you went hungry? I bet you can't even remember. That's got nothing to do with this. It's not about being full, it's about Mukouda's food being better than anything else I've ever eaten, Rita countered. Vincent nodded in enthusiastic agreement. I actually thought we'd run into you earlier, to be honest. We figured we'd see you in the Capital's Guild Hall eventually, but you never showed up at all, he added with a slight pout. Yeah, that's my bad. Sorry, I replied. I'd had my reasons for staying as far away from the guild as possible. Well, one reason, really, that being my desire to not get involved with one particularly irritating individual as far as I could manage, though considering that he'd found me a few minutes ago, that plan had only carried me so far. Admit it, you were just hoping that you could convince him to cook for us, Franca said as she rolled her eyes. Oh, lay off. Vincent snapped. I'm not the only one who had his hopes up. Remember how Rita was all oh, boy, we might get to eat his cooking again when we found out. She was literally drooling. Was not. I've never drooled in my life. Rita shouted. Huh. I know what I saw. You didn't see squat. As Vincent and Rita's exchange devolved into a shouting match, Franca shook her head and sighed. Honestly, you too, she muttered. Would the two of you please restrain yourselves? Ramon finally said, cutting into Vincent and Rita's argument. That put an end to their verbal sniping, at least, though they still kept glaring at each other like a pair of hissing kittens. I guess this might be one of those cases where the more you get along with someone, the more likely you are to have silly little fights. Sorry for the ruckus, Werner abashedly commented. Oh, nah, it's fine, I reassured him. I'm actually glad to see how little all of you have changed since the last time we met. Haha, you're not wrong about that. Vincent's as cocky and Rita's as loudmouthed as ever. Boss! Vincent and Rita shouted in unison. Not to mention sharp-eared at the worst possible times, Werner added with a grin as he glanced back at them. Now it was my turn to be a little jealous. I sort of envied how well their party got along. Oh, right. Not to contradict you or anything, but we actually have changed in one big way. Oh, what's that? I asked. That surprised me. None of them looked any different, at least. We've moved up to B rank, that's what, Werner said. Oh, seriously? Congratulations. Thanks. As a matter of fact, that is also the reason we were able to participate in this endeavor, Ramon noted. That answered one question I hadn't really thought to ask. B rank, it seemed, was the point at which the guild considered an adventuring party to be high-ranked. Well, that's something we'll have to celebrate later for sure, I said. Maybe I'll take them to a nice restaurant in the capital once the Leviathan's all carved up, or something. Ooh. In that case, I want to eat your cooking again, exclaimed Vincent. Count me in too. Rita chimed in. What, really? But we're in the capital. There's gotta be tons of restaurants around here that make way better food than I can, I protested. The capital was huge, and had so many more restaurants than a typical town that there really was no comparison. Plus, I'd heard that a lot of those restaurants were really high class. Genuine gourmet dining had to be better than the slapdash home-cooked meals that I always threw together, and I'd thought that visiting one would be a nice treat for everyone. And to be honest, I just wanted to go to one myself. That is absolutely not true. Vincent insisted. I've been to top-class restaurants before, and they taught me a valuable lesson. It takes more than expensive spices and fancy meat to make a tasty meal. Your food is way better than anything you could get at one of those places. That's right. Rita agreed. Your food really is incredible, Mukouda. The two of them stared straight at me, their gazes full of hope. Don't give me that look, please. I mean, if you're really fine with my cooking, then sure, I conceded. Hell yeah. Woohoo. Vincent and Rita threw their hands up in celebration. Again, Mukouda, I'm so sorry about this, Werner sighed. It's fine, really. I'm not exactly offended to find out that they like my cooking that much. We kept chatting and catching up for some time until finally, the gathered adventurers were called away to meet with the guild's higher-ups. As time went on, more and more participants kept pouring into the field. Shortly after Iron Will was called away, one of the guild's officials came over to speak to me. All right. It's time to bring out the Leviathan, if you would, the guild master of the capital branch, Bram, said to me. I hesitated. I'd already exposed my item box's capacity to a fair number of people, but letting that secret slip in front of a crowd this huge still felt like a step too far. What are you waiting for? Bring it out. Go on, my liege. We'll never get this done if you don't get it out already. Master, what's wrong? My familiars all chimed in telepathically to rush me, and I replied telepathically as well. See, the thing is, if I bring it out here, then all these people will know about my item box, I said. Just the fact that I had one was bad enough. If I revealed that mine was big enough to fit a monster of that size, it was all but certain that the rumor mill would spread that information far and wide in no time. Surely it is far too late to concern yourself with such matters? Fell said. I mean, maybe, but so far I've always told people that mine is just a little on the big side of things. If I pull a literal Leviathan out of it, they're gonna know that I have something hero-adjacent going on for sure, I replied. But why would that be an issue? Gunn asked. You have me and Fell in your service, my liege. It seems less than likely that anyone would be so reckless or foolish as to lay a hand on you. I mean, you're not wrong, but still. Fell clicked his tongue with irritation. You have wasted more than enough time. Bring the beast out at once, he impatiently urged. The guild higher-ups, meanwhile, who couldn't hear any of my conversation with my familiars, of course, looked very confused. I could hear them muttering to one another. I caught a "what's wrong with him," and a "how long is this going to take," among other comments. Fine. I'll do it. It was time to throw caution to the wind. I pulled the Leviathan out of my item box, and it landed on the ground before me with an enormous thud. The guild higher-ups had already seen its head, so they'd had some idea of its scale, but witnessing the corpse in full for the first time still made their jaws drop. I can't believe it's that enormous. It's even larger than I'd imagined. Same here. To think even this field would barely be big enough for it. We can count ourselves lucky there was a large enough space at all. I guess it'd be hard not to be surprised when you saw that thing. Yeah. I really got where they were coming from and, for that matter, how the adventurers who'd been holding their meeting a short distance away felt as well. They were stunned, for the most part, though one of them was reacting in a slightly more outrageous sort of way. Woohoo! I heard a downright bizarre wail of joy as one of the adventurers split off from the pack, sprinting full tilt over to the Leviathan and clinging to its side. It's a Leviathan. An actual, genuine, Leviathan. I didn't even need to take a closer look to figure out who that was. There was only one person here who'd behave so ridiculously. Elrond, what are you doing? Never make that horrid noise again, Moira shouted, loudly enough that I could hear her clearly even from across the field. You've got a tough job, Moira, but someone definitely has to do it. Before long, the higher-ups started making their way over toward Elrond. We reluctantly followed along, though by that point, we meant me, Fell, and Sway. Gunn and Dora-chan had been so disturbed by Elrond's shout that they'd excused themselves on the spot. In Gunn's words, I have raised my barrier. Fell will have to handle the rest. In the meantime, I shall patrol the skies. Why yeah, me too. Dora-chan had chimed in. The next thing I knew, the two of them had evacuated into the air above us. Fel had seemed content with the idea of a mid-air guard, and had readily agreed to the plan before raising a barrier of his own. Nobody's suffered more from Elrond's eccentricity than Gan and Dora-chan, I guess. I could understand why his unhinged wail had driven them away in a heartbeat. If I'd had my way, I would have kept my distance from him too. However, the guild's highest-ranking officer, Bram, had other ideas. Here's a problem, I'll grant you that, but we really do need him to direct the Leviathan's butchering, he'd groaned. The other bigwigs all chimed in with their own opinions as well. It's shocking how competent he is, considering. In his field, and only his field. You've met him before, haven't you, Mukouda? I'm sure you understand. Bringing him here was a necessary evil. Yeah, again, I can relate. You all have my sympathies. I reluctantly plodded over to where Elrond was still adhered to the side of the Leviathan, seemingly in a trance. Bram rolled his eyes and stepped up to him. All right, Elrond, that's enough of that, he said. Oh, Bram, Elrond excitedly exclaimed. Look, it's a Leviathan. It's a real Leviathan. If there's one thing I'll give this elf, it's that he's consistent to a fault. Not even the highest-ranking member of the guild in the country can sway him. Bram sighed. I'm well aware, thank you. That's the only reason you're here, though I'm starting to wonder if that was a mistake after all. I nodded in reflexive agreement. Right. Hard not to start questioning these things when you see him like that. Elrond blinked. What are you saying? Do you really think there's anyone else out there who could butcher a Leviathan? A Leviathan? No one could possibly be more suited for this job than me, and that's a fact, he vehemently insisted. Then hurry up and prove it. You've got a job to do, and you'd better do it well, Bram demanded. The other guild leaders chimed in to agree. Your concern is not needed, Elrond huffed. I'll do my job, and I'll do it perfectly. I just need a moment to enjoy the Leviathan to its fullest before I get started. A very loud slap resounded across the field. Oh. You are in no position to make demands. Do your work, and do it now. Moira fumed, a furious scowl once again plastered across her face. Elrond's chaperone had saved the day yet again. Come, why are you all so insistent on rushing me? You could at least spare me a moment to bask in the blissful joy of meeting my very first Leviathan, Elrond grumbled, but between Moira's expression, which had grown even more threatening and was now downright demonic, and the glares of the higher-ups, which were so frigid they felt like they'd hit absolute zero, he seemed to finally take the hint. I'll do it, though. Have it your way, he squeaked before shifting into work mode. For the first time that day, a very serious look came across Elrond's face as he started inspecting the Leviathan. Just looking over the Leviathan's whole body took quite a long time. No surprise there, considering how ginormous it was. I actually started wondering if I could get away with slipping off to wait somewhere a little nicer at one point, but of course, I would have no such luck. I did try by telling Fel and Sway, so hey, even if someone does try to get at the Leviathan, those two barriers should keep them far away from it, and if someone actually got through them, you'd know right away. Seeing as there's nothing for us to do to help, why don't we go find somewhere more comfortable to sit down? Through telepathy, but Fel was unconvinced. The elf's obsession with the Leviathan makes him the greatest threat of all. I will not let him out of my sight, was how Fel put it. Okay, yeah. It's hard not to see it that way, considering how Elrond's been acting. I didn't like it, but I also couldn't deny that Fel had made a solid case. That said, it was also true that Elrond had Moira constantly breathing down his neck, not to mention every single one of the Adventurers Guild higher-ups watching him like a hawk. Apparently, nobody trusted him. Anyway, to make a long story short, I was stuck walking along with Moira and the guild folks as Elrond did his checks. The king, queen, and assorted nobility who were attending arrived partway through that period, raising a bit of an uproar in doing so, but the king instructed everyone to pay them no mind and keep working. Nobody was about to argue with him, so the process resumed as quickly as it had been disrupted. At long last, Elrond seemed to have finished checking the Leviathan from top to bottom, but to my surprise, he ended up returning to us with a frown on his face. "What's wrong, Elrond?" Bram asked. "I'm afraid to say that, unfortunately, butchering this Leviathan may prove impossible," Elrond replied. "What?" Bram wailed, completely aghast. That was not the news he'd been hoping for after over a week of preparation. "All that talk about how much you were looking forward to it, and now you mean to tell us you're not up to the task?" Moira jabbed. "We remember how confident you were," said one of the guild's higher-ups. "You badgered us incessantly to get things started as soon as possible," another exclaimed. "Indeed. What is the meaning of this, elf?" Fell barked, joining in on the protest. Everyone, Fell included, kept hounding Elrond for an answer for some time, noting that if he couldn't handle the job, he should have said so in the first place, and griping bitterly about how he'd made it sound like butchering the monster would be child's play for him. Elrond had ended up with a whole crowd of very angry people on his case. Wait. At least let me explain myself," Elrond frantically shouted. "Hey, Master. Does this mean Sway doesn't get to try the Leviathan meat after all?" Sway asked. The slime was already feeling a little depressed, from the sound of it. "I hate to say it, but we should try to be ready for that possibility," I replied. "Ah. Sway wants Leviathan meat, Master," Sway repeated as it bounced off Fell's back, landing in my arms. "I guess you were more excited than anyone, huh, Sway?" I gave the slime a comforting pat as I waited for Elrond to clarify what was going on. "Well then, to put matters simply," Elrond began. He launched into an explanation, bringing me, Bram, the rest of the guild's leaders, and Moira up to speed on why it might not be possible to butcher the Leviathan after all. According to Elrond, he'd spent the entire trip from his home to the capital reading and rereading a reference book on Leviathans, barely even pausing to eat or sleep. One passage that had particularly grabbed his attention recounted the processing of a Leviathan that had been brought to the Adventurers Guild roughly 400 years ago. That book, by the way, had apparently been the prized possession of another nation's Adventurers Guild. They'd actually refused to show it to Elrond, who'd been a C-ranked adventurer at the time, and he'd responded by snatching it when no one was looking. "What were you thinking, Elrond? As in, what were you thinking when you stole the book? And what were you thinking just now when you admitted it to us? You could have easily kept that part to yourself, and then Moira wouldn't have had to punch you." Anyway, that digression aside, the book had contained incredibly detailed information regarding how the Leviathan had been slain, how it had been butchered, and which parts had been sold for how much gold. Every bit of it, from the last drop of its blood to the smallest of its bones, fetched a high price, Elrond explained. Moira and the higher-ups muttered about how unsurprising that was to one another. They knew that would be the case, and so a magical tool was devised and crafted to ensure that none of its blood went to waste, Elrond continued. Apparently, this was something that had been on Elrond's mind since I had asked him to butcher the earth dragon that we'd caught. Butchering a creature indoors on a workbench made collecting its blood relatively easy. All you had to do was tilt the work surface slightly, and the blood would flow exactly where you wanted it to. Butchering a dragon that was far too big to fit on a workbench, however, was a much taller order, and Elrond had known that as long as my familiars and I were around, it was a problem that he would be faced with sooner or later. "And that's why I made these," Elrond declared with a rather self-satisfied grin as he brought what looked like a long, narrow tube out from his item box. "I've never been happier to have dabbled in magic tool creation. I may not be a master of the craft, but making simple tools is well within my abilities." "You mean making them with my help is," Moira noted. With the help of Moira, the most esteemed and knowledgeable magical craftswoman. "I made 14 of them in total," Elrond said. He explained that his tools used wind magic to produce a suction effect. "All right, then. I take it you were planning to use those tools to drain the Leviathan's blood?" Bram asked. "Yes, that's exactly right," Elrond replied. "Well, if you put enough care and forethought into this project to craft tools like that, why are you telling us that butchering it might still be impossible?" Right. He was excited enough to sink that sort of time and effort into this project. What could be a big enough issue to make him abandon it? Well, I believe that with my tools, recovering the Leviathan's blood should indeed be possible. But that's just its blood, Elrond specified. At that point, the conversation finally looped back around to the book he'd read on his way to the capital about the Leviathan that had been brought in 400 years ago. The issue stems from the fact that the Leviathan back then was quite a bit smaller than the one we're dealing with now, Elrond explained. Supposedly, there had been some suspicion 4 centuries prior that the slain Leviathan had been a juvenile. Having inspected the one I'd brought in, Elrond was now certain that theory was true. And even so, butchering the Leviathan back then required the use of a dragon sword. It seemed they'd had a mithril butchering knife on hand, which had technically been capable of cutting through the Leviathan's hide, but not without applying an impractical amount of strength. Cuts made with the mithril knife had turned out rough and imprecise. At the time, however, the guild had been in possession of a dragon sword, which had been even sharper than a mithril blade. They'd tested it out just for good measure and had been surprised to find that it sliced through the beast with ease. In the end, they'd used the dragon sword throughout the whole process, ensuring that the Leviathan's extraordinarily useful materials could be harvested undamaged. And knowing all that, I naturally decided to bring my dragon sword along with me, Elrond said. He drew the sword that was hung in a scabbard at his waist in a swift, fluid motion. What do you think? A thing of beauty, isn't it? It was crafted from the fang of a red dragon. Just look at that luster, he excitedly declared as he practically shoved the dragon sword in our faces. It wouldn't have surprised me if he'd started nuzzling the thing. Elrond was incredibly consistent, if nothing else. How in all that is holy did you get your hands on one of those? Bram demanded. The other higher-ups had started muttering to one another as well. Their reactions alone made it pretty clear that dragon swords were very rare. Thwack. Ah! Elrond wailed as he fell to his knees. He almost dropped his dragon sword, but just barely managed to hold on to it in the end, not that getting dropped on the ground could ever damage a weapon like that in the first place. What was that for? You can't just kick people like that, Moira. I almost dropped my precious, beautiful dragon sword thanks to you. You earned that kick, and you know it. Moira shot back. What do you mean, your dragon sword? We both know very well that it isn't yours at all. Ugol told me the whole story. You bought the fang with your own money, but you couldn't afford to have it made into anything and went into debt with the guild to cover the expense. Elrond gulped. Wait, seriously? I exclaimed. You went into debt, Elrond? Are you nuts? Moira let out a long, heavy sigh. He badgered Ugol into agreeing to it. By which I mean he followed him around day in and day out, bawling like an infant and swearing that he'd put the finished sword up as collateral until he'd paid off his debt. Ugp. Elrond grunted. What was that noise? And seriously, what were you thinking? Well, Bram said with a roll of his eyes, I think we can all agree that an extension of Moira's tenure is in order. Agreed, the other higher-ups said in unison. What? But why? Elrond wailed. Why? Really? I can't believe you have the nerve to ask that after bringing your private life into your day job that intrusively. This is totally on you, Elrond. But we've drifted from the point at hand, Bram continued. From what you've told us, butchering the Leviathan should be possible with a dragon sword, which you have. I don't see the issue. The other bigwigs and Moira muttered in agreement. Elrond sighed. Yes, well, if this was the Leviathan from 4 centuries ago, there wouldn't be an issue at all. That, however, was a young Leviathan, he said as he glanced over at the impossibly huge corpse lying on the ground. The rest of us took a moment to stare at it as well. Does that look young to you? Not even remotely, Bram said. Yeah, no kidding. Assuming my inferences are correct. Hurrah! Elrond exclaimed as he swung his dragon's sword at the Leviathan's side. Pieing. He swung again. Hiya. Kaeshiing. And again. Ha. Dying. At first, it didn't seem like Elrond was making any progress at all. It took him 5 whole slashes to make any sort of cut in the Leviathan's hide, and a few more to reach the meat beneath. Elrond paused to gasp for breath. So, as you can see, we can make the incisions we need to drain the beast's blood, particularly given that we can work with the wounds that can left, but do you see any practical way to butcher it beyond that? Well, you did cut it in the end, didn't you? It took some effort, yes, but it's not impossible, Bram protested. Elrond sighed once again. I did, yes, because I had the skills and knowledge necessary to do so. How many people do you think would be able to strike the exact same spot, multiple times in a row, with perfect precision and the force necessary to pierce its hide? Well. Not to mention that it would only be a matter of time before my precious dragon sword shattered. A short matter of time, Elrond added. He'd casually referred to it as his dragon sword yet again, brushing past the fact that it would only be his after he'd paid off his debt. If you can prepare several more dragon swords to expend over the course of the project, then I suppose it would technically be possible to butcher it. Is that within your means? Bram grunted with a scowl. Everyone, presumably including Elrond, knew that the very idea of having multiple dragon swords on hand for something like this was absurd. And that, in short, is why I believe that butchering this Leviathan may very well be impossible for us. Unless we can get our hands on a magic sword, or some equivalent tool, it's just not going to be practical, Elrond concluded. Ahem. A magic sword. I looked at Elrond. He looked at me. Ah. Whoa. Why are you pointing at me like that? Cut it out. The next thing I knew, Elrond had sprinted straight over to me and grabbed me by the shoulders. There was a legitimately crazed look in his eyes. That's it. Of course. Your magic sword, Mukouda Tsuyoshi. The one you found at the bottom of the Dolan dungeon. You're really just saying that? Straight up, full volume, in front of everyone? I understand. In short, using a magic sword will allow you to butcher the Leviathan, correct? Why are you chiming in now, Fel? Of all the moments. Yes, it absolutely would. Elrond insisted. I see. In that case, you will have to provide the equipment they need, Fel said, glancing at me. You have several, do you not? Bring them all out. Okay, nope. Hold the phone, Fel. Is everyone planning on spilling my secrets without a second thought here? Hold on a minute, Bram said. Did I hear the Fenrir right just now? Did he say you have several of them? Oh, no. My gaze met Bram's. Well, I stammered as a waterfall of cold sweat began to drip from my pores. He has 4, as I recall. Fel had once again casually given up one of my most closely kept secrets, and this one had even more of an impact than the others. Bram, Moira, Elrond, and the other guild bigwigs had all been rendered speechless. I started seriously considering spinning around and heading for the hills while they were still out of it, but before I could resolve myself to make a break for it, Elrond, who, by the way, was still holding on to my shoulders, came back to his senses a step ahead of the others and started shaking me wildly, the look in his eyes more crazed than ever. Why you have more of them, Mukouda? Tsuyoshi isn't your only magic sword. Oh, God, okay, back off. The face you're making right now's terrifying enough when I'm not seeing it at point-blank range. How are your eyes even that bloodshot? See, calm down, Elrond, please, and give me some personal space while you're at it, I shouted as I shoved him away from me. It didn't work very well. The elf kept a very firm grip on my shoulders, and was huffing and puffing wildly as he tightened his grip. He had no intention of letting me go anywhere. All right, settle down, Elrond, said Bram, who stepped up to Elrond and patted him on the back. Now then, Mukouda, is that true? Do you really have 4 magic swords in your possession? I gulped. Bram sounded calm and collected. He was smiling, even, but there was something about the look on his face, something about the look in his eyes, that wasn't friendly at all. It was terrifying. Well, the thing is, I stammered. I couldn't stop glancing at Bram's face every other word. Give it to us straight, Mukouda. Please. I hesitated, then gave in. It's, true. I have 4, yeah, I admitted. I could tell that even if I tried to lie, Bram would have seen right through me. A stir began to run through the higher-ups, but Bram put a quick stop to it before things could get out of hand. Let's see them, he said. I started bringing the magic swords out from my item box, one by one. This one's Caladbolg, I said as I pulled out the first blade. Elrond held his hands out, and I reflexively passed it to him without really considering what I was doing. This is the one that the behemoth at the bottom of the Dolan dungeon left behind. It's made out of adamantite, I believe. Elrond enthusiastically explained. Yup, it's adamantite. That's why it's so heavy, and that's also yet another piece of information that would have been better kept secret. Not that it really matters at this point, I guess. Then these are Hrunting, Gram, and Ekasax, I continued as I produced the remaining 3 swords, which I handed to Bram and 2 of the other big shots who held their hands out as well. I idly wondered if those 3 had the greatest seniority out of the 5 of them. One way or another, all 3 of them were overjoyed to get to hold a magic sword. I knew that for a fact because they said as much, out loud, very excitedly. It was like they were a trio of little kids playing with their new toys, and I couldn't help but be a little charmed in spite of myself. I spent a while watching them until finally, Elrond cleared his throat. Ahem. May I, he said, gesturing toward the Leviathan. He seemed ready to set about butchering the creature that very moment. The high-ranking guild officers seemed to snap back to reality with a start, and all looked a little embarrassed by their momentary lapse. I shouldn't have laughed, but I have to admit that I might have let out a chuckle. I believe we should have no difficulty butchering the Leviathan if we borrow these swords from Mukouda, but I'll have to test that before I can make any promises. We'll begin by bleeding it. Follow me, please. Elrond led us up along the Leviathan's body, finally coming to a stop near its head specifically, by the enormous wound that Gunn had left when he bit its head most of the way off. Blue blood was oozing out of the gash, and it seemed that they'd already set out basins to collect all of it, which struck me as smart of them. Now, ordinarily I would make a cut around the base of the creature's head, but seeing as Gunn apparently already handled that part of the process. Hiya. Elrond moved away from the wound, striking slightly farther down on the Leviathan's body with Caladbolg. The sword pierced straight through the creature's hide with a mighty sheeing, and sliced nearly halfway through its body in a single stroke. A wave of blue blood gushed out of the gash, soaking Elrond, Bram, the rest of the bigwigs, Moira, and me from head to foot. Fool, Fel commented with a roll of his eyes. Agreed. Also, how did you manage to get out of that spotless, Fel? I'm gonna smell like fish for weeks, I muttered with a grimace. The Leviathan's blood had a very potent aroma before shooting Fel a glare. Really? Putting up a barrier around yourself and leaving me to get soaked? That's not even a little bit fair. Me. What I do with my power is my business, and mine alone. I see no reason not to use it for my own sake, Fel countered. Okay, but it's not like it would have cost you anything to put it around me too, right? Maybe it happened too quickly for you to manage it, I guess, but I'm still not happy about it. Master, are you okay? Sway asked. That's definitely not the word I'd use to describe myself right now, no. Let's just go home, okay? I really want to change out of these clothes, I said. Sway, by the way, had been on Fel's head at the time of the disaster and had gotten out unscathed. I was the only one who'd gotten dunked face first in Leviathan fluids. Surely you jest. They have only now gotten started, and you expect us to abandon our watch? Fel said. I was ready to get the heck out of there, but of course he wasn't going to make it easy. Come on, just look at me, this is so nasty, I whined. I'd wiped my head off as best as I could, of course, but there was no saving my outfit. My shirt and pants were both drenched in blue blood. You will simply have to bear with it. If we were to leave, we would be unable to deal with any miscreants who managed to sneak in. I guess I can't argue with that. As the project had dragged on, a surprisingly large crowd of rubberneckers had gathered up to spectate. The adventurers who'd shown up to help were doing a good job of keeping anyone from getting close to the Leviathan, and even if someone managed to slip past the first layer of security, they'd run straight into Fell's and Gan's barriers. But I had to admit that even just the thought of thieves lurking around was a little disquieting. Okay, fine, plan B, I said. Hey, Sway, you know how you spray Uncle Fell with water sometimes to clean him off? Think you could do that for me? Yeah, okay. Great, thanks. Sway stretched out a tentacle and showered me off with it, washing away the nasty, fishy Leviathan blood. I hope you'll at least be up for drying me off, Fell? If you insist. There, Fell said as he buffeted me with a burst of warm air. A short while later, my clothes were finally dry. Still a little fishy smelling, but much better than before, at least. Looks like things are finally settling down on that end of things as well, I noted. The burst of Leviathan blood had caused a pretty sizable uproar, which was totally unsurprising considering the stuff was worth a not-so-small fortune. Every drop of blood left to soak into the ground was effectively gold poured straight down the drain. The bigwigs and Moira had been so busy ordering the guild staff to collect as much of it as possible that it seemed like they barely even noticed that they were as thoroughly blood-soaked as I'd been. It seemed, however, that the gash Elrond had cut had finally finished actively bleeding, and with the help of his magic tools, the workers set up a system to safely and effectively collect the Leviathan's remaining fluids. Now that things were once again under control, the higher-ups' attention turned back to a certain person who, frankly, all of us knew was due for a scolding. Oh, Elrond. I'm really sorry about this, the elf muttered. He was down on his knees, right on the dirt, with Moira, Bram, and the others all looming over him. Bram looked especially furious. I don't mind being soaked in blood, he said. Well, no, I mind it quite a lot, actually, but I can tolerate it. What I can't tolerate is wasting gallons of a resource as tremendously precious as Leviathan blood, and I know for a fact that we're not the only ones who feel that way. Look. Bram gestured at a group of individuals who were gathered up nearby, and boy oh boy, did they look furious. They were shouting stuff along the lines of how dare you, and sham of a butcher and make him pay with his head. Those are the capital's apothecaries, Bram explained. I believe you are aware of just how prized this blood is to individuals of their profession. Oof. That would do it, all right. I bet Leviathan blood's one of those things that you can synthesize super potent medicines with. No wonder they'd be upset. And I hope you realize just how much of that precious blood you used to water the grass a few moments ago. I'm so sorry. Elrond wailed, bowing so low he pressed his face into the ground. It was a really impressive display of remorse by Japanese standards, though part of me had to wonder if that pose carried the same sort of connotations in this world, or if he was simply doing it instinctively. Why are you apologizing to us? Have you forgotten who this Leviathan belongs to in the first place? Bram bellowed. Elrond stood up, scooted over to me, then got right back down on the ground and bowed once more. I am so sorry, Mukouda. Heh. Wait, no, stop. No crying. And no kowtowing either, please. It's making me really uncomfortable. My carelessness wasted so much of your precious Leviathan blood. I know I can never make it up to you, but I'm truly sorry. Elrond wailed, a river of tears pouring down his cheeks. Elf or not, I don't think anyone would enjoy seeing a man of his age bawl like that. It's fine, honestly, I said. We really don't care much about the blood in the first place. Alright, guys? Correct. I have no interest in the beast's blood. I care only for the meat, and the speed at which we obtain it. Leviathan meat. SC. Not a big deal. My familiars only care about the prey they catch up to the point where we've gotten its meat. After that, anything goes as far as they're concerned. So please quit crying like that, okay? We're getting a lot of stares, and I'm really not enjoying all the attention. Mukouda. I knew it. You really are my greatest friend. Bois. Elrond wailed as he flung his arms around my leg. Gah. No. Off. Let go of me. My bosom buddy. Mukouda. No, seriously, let go. Personal space. Personal sparas. Heave, hoed, the workers grunted as they plopped a chunk of one of the Leviathan's organs, maybe its heart, or its liver, or something, into a massive pot. The guild folks were hard at work chopping up and pulling out the beast's insides, and oh God, was it ever gross. No, seriously, can I please just go home now? It had been a long and eventful process, with a fair few of those events involving Elrond clinging to the Leviathan again, but the monster's blood had finally been drained. The butchering process had now moved on to its next stage, harvesting the Leviathan's innards. Elrond was ecstatically chopping away at its stomach with my magic sword, though he didn't let his ebullience get the better of him and was taking a lot more care than you'd think at a glance. The biggest obstacle that stood in our way was, unsurprisingly, the creature's incredibly tough hide. That was a trait that wasn't exclusive to Leviathans, it seemed all dragons had it, to a greater or lesser extent. However, once you managed to cut through their skin, or rather, if you managed to cut through it, the fact that we had to bring out magic swords to do the job said it all, the creature's flesh and innards were soft enough to slice with perfectly ordinary knives. Not even the strongest monsters, it seemed, were borderline invulnerable both outside and in. Of course, just because it could be butchered with an ordinary knife didn't mean that was what we'd actually settled on. In Elrond's words, "This is a Leviathan we're working on. My cuts have to be as clean and precise as possible if I want to avoid waste, and that means I have to use a mithril knife," a declaration that he proceeded to follow through on. As you might expect, considering the creature's sheer size, the Leviathan's organs were ginormous as well. Not even the biggest containers that the guild could provide were big enough to fit even its smallest organs, so instead, each of them was cut apart on a wooden butchering table and then stored in pieces. It was a really gruesome process to watch, but Elrond seemed over the moon to be right down in the thick of it. I even caught him muttering little comments to himself from time to time along the lines of, "Oh, I see. So that's where their hearts are located," or "I've never seen a liver this glossy and firm before. Beautiful." I've got to admit, watching a guy talk to himself while he disembowels a monster might very well be the creepiest thing I've seen in ages. In short, the whole process was mentally exhausting to watch. It kept wearing on until eventually, Bram let out a shout. "All right, let's wrap it up for today," he said. "What?" Elrond exclaimed. "But I still have so much work left to do." "I'm aware, and you'll just have to do it tomorrow." "Why, though? I can work straight through the night. That wouldn't bother me at all." "Even if you wouldn't mind, I can't afford to take responsibility for that decision." According to Bram, our current security setup wouldn't be sufficient to make working through the night a feasible plan. The fall of darkness would almost definitely mean more would-be thieves deciding to try to grab a quick windfall. Not only would the guards have more trouble to deal with, they'd also be working in worse visibility and dealing with the exhaustion of staying up and alert long into the night. Putting a pause on the process was the much more practical option, and so I stowed the remainder of the Leviathan's corpse in my item box once more. We could pick it up again the next day, when we'd be working under much safer circumstances. "I'd like to begin at the same time tomorrow as we did today. Will that work for you, Mukouda?" Bram asked. "That should be fine, yes," I replied. "No objections, right, Fel?" HMPH. I wish to partake of the Leviathan's meat as soon as possible, but the reason behind your words does not escape me. An overnight vigil is far from a desirable task. All the more so seeing as I have grown quite hungry, he added as he shot me a rather sharp glance. "Oh, crap. Now that he mentions it, we totally skipped lunch today, didn't we?" I'd been so preoccupied watching everyone go about their business that it had completely slipped my mind. Sway didn't eat anything for lunch, so Sway's really, really hungry too, the slime chimed in from its perch atop Fel's head. "Yeah, my bad. I'll make something really filling as soon as we get home," I telepathically assured my familiars. "What am I gonna do with this stuff?" I muttered as I gazed at the lump of meat on the kitchen counter. It looked more like whitefish than anything else, and I was at a loss as to how I should prepare it. I guess the first thing I should do is cook a bit and give it a taste test. I cut off a small portion of the meat, lightly seasoned it with salt and pepper, and got it cooking in a frying pan. My ingredient of choice that evening was ice dragon meat, which I'd obtained back in the Brix dungeon. That particular dungeon had concluded with us meeting Gan, which had been such a huge deal it had more or less blown everything that came before it out of the water in terms of significance. In other words, I'd totally forgotten that the meat had dropped at all. Honestly, I'm impressed that Fel did manage to remember it. When it became clear that the rest of the butchering process would have to wait till the next day, I'd sent Gan and Dora-chan a telepathic message, and the 5 of us had reconvened on solid ground to go home. Elrond had done his best to turn that 5 into 6, but Moira had descended upon him like a bolt of elven lightning and we'd managed to return to the house we'd rented without any unwelcome hangers-on in the end. I hadn't really done anything at all throughout the whole day, and yet I felt like my time in that field had been packed with exhausting events from start to finish. I was hoping to sit back, relax, and sip my way through a nice cup of coffee before making dinner, but Fel, of course, had other ideas. A day such as this merits a delicious dinner. No, it demands it, Fel said the second we stepped through the door. Gan, Dora-chan, and Sway had quickly chimed in to agree, and just like that, my fate was sealed. Anyway, dragon meat was more or less the gold standard for delicious food, as far as my familiars were concerned. It had only been a couple days since we'd had dragon steaks at Earl Langridge's home, though, and my reserves of both earth and red dragon meat were looking really dicey. I barely had any earth dragon meat left at all. In fact, the amount I had in stock would probably only get me through 2 more meals at most, considering how much my party ate. I knew for a fact that everyone would suddenly start craving that stuff the second I was out of it, and unfortunately, I also knew that running into an earth dragon and a red dragon in quick succession had been a major stroke of luck. Then again, it does sort of feel like dragons are magnetically drawn to me, or something. Maybe it won't be an issue in the long term after all. When I explained our dragon meat predicament to Fel, he'd paused for a moment to consider the matter before suddenly perking up with excitement. Come to think of it, did we not have the meat of an ice dragon? He asked. I'd actually had no idea what he'd been talking about at first, but when I checked my item box and really did find the stuff, it all came back to me in a flash. Though we are not able to eat the Leviathan yet, the meat of an ice dragon will serve as a satisfactory appetizer. They are, after all, not altogether unalike in flavor. It will enhance our anticipation for the Leviathan itself, Fel declared. Oh, an ice dragon's meat is a rare thing indeed, Gun noted. And I suppose it does taste rather similar to Leviathan meat, yes. I'm excited to sample what you make with it. Right, from that one dungeon, we met Gun right after, and I forgot all about it. Dora-chan said. Oh, ice dragon meat, Sway cooed excitedly. Just like that, ice dragon meat was put on the evening's menu before I could get a word in edgewise. My familiars sent me off to the kitchen on the double, their gazes full of anticipation. All right, that should do it, I said as I plucked the piece of ice dragon meat from the frying pan. It still looked pretty fish-like, even after it was cooked. I gave it a bite. Oh, I murmured. The meat was soft, flaky, even. You know, this reminds me a little of cod, actually, I said. The meat was deliciously umami-rich in a way that cod could never compare to, of course, but in terms of texture, there was a distinct similarity. Yeah, this is really tasty. That's dragon meat for you, I guess. I can think of all sorts of dishes that it would work well in. A nice, simple meunier would be good, but I think I have a better idea. An image had sprung into my mind of a veritable mountain of fish and chips. Yeah, that sounds like it'd hit the spot. I think I'm on to something. Tonight's dinner will be fish and chips, for sure. I snapped up some simple ingredients from my online supermarket, then got right to work. To start, I cut a bunch of Auburn's homegrown potatoes into wedges, leaving their peels on, then left them to soak in a bowl of water. While the fries were soaking, I sliced the ice dragon meat into pieces, gave them the all salt and pepper treatment, and lightly dusted them with flour as well. Next up, the batter. I combined flour, baking powder, and a little salt in a bowl, then added liquid in the form of beer. The combination of beer and baking powder would give the batter a really nice, satisfying crunch when it was fried. Speaking of frying, that was the very next step. I dipped the pieces of ice dragon meat in the batter, then plopped them right into the oil. The potato wedgies had spent long enough in their bath by that point, so I scooped them out and gave them a very thorough drying before frying them as well. This was one of those moments when having several burners available to me was a godsend. I could have multiple pots of oil going at the same time. When the fries and fish were just the right shade of golden brown, I pulled them from the oil, let them drain for a moment, and that was that. Okay, that should do it. All it needs is some ketchup, and I paused to bring out a certain secret ingredient from my item box, my own homemade tartar sauce. The sauce was a very simple mixture of minced-up hard-boiled eggs, pickles, and onions, plus mayo, vinegar, and a bit of salt and pepper. I'd made a ton of it a while back, and still had plenty left over for this meal. All right, looking perfect. I piled everyone's plates high with fish and chips, stashed them in my item box, and headed out into the living room where my familiars were eagerly waiting for me. Here you go, guys. I decided to try frying the dragon meat this time, I said as I presented the fish and chips to everyone. This is not unsatisfactory, though the potatoes are unnecessary, Fell said, wasting no time in digging into the dragon meat side of the meal. Well, fries are an essential part of this dish, and that's all there is to it, I said. You should really try them before you complain. They're great. Yes, this is delicious. What a wonderful crunch. It gives me the strangest thirst, if you take my meaning, my liege, Gun said as he dug into his meal as well. Oh, do I ever? A beer would go great with this, I agreed. Honestly, that's a really good idea. I should bring one out for him and for myself, while I'm at it. This white stuff's called tartar sauce, right? It works so well with the meat. I can always count on you to appreciate these things, Dora-chan. Fish and chips just isn't the same without tartar sauce. This is so yummy, master. And looks like Sway's a fan too. Always good to see. Time for me to take a bite too. But first. How about a beer, Gan? Oh, is tonight a night to indulge, my liege? Why not? Though we've got another long day ahead of us tomorrow, so only a little, I replied. Fortunately, I picked out a few good-looking beers for myself last time I was looking for offerings for Agni. Already got them nice and chilled too. Here we are. This is a kind of expensive one. It came in a gift set. I started filling up Gun's bowl with beer, and went through 3 bottles of the stuff before it was actually full. Should be fine, I guess. Okay, here you go. Ooh. Many thanks, my liege. Let's have a taste, Gun said before skillfully gulping down a hearty mouthful. Ah. This is delectable indeed. It's nothing like the human liquors I've drunk before. Ha ha ha. That'd be because this stuff's from the world I came from, I explained. Might I ask for seconds, perhaps? Gun said, nudging his bowl toward me with one of his foreclaws. Wait, you already finished? Okay, but like I said, not too much, I replied as I opened up another 3 bottles to refill his vessel. All things considered, it was another fun, slightly raucous dinner. Before long, I heard the front door open. I'm back, Willem called out as he stepped inside. Oh, hey. Welcome home, I replied. Drinking already, are you? Willem jabbed. Seems you've been having a proper party for yourselves while I was hard at work. Well, it's not like there was any work we could have done even if we'd stuck around, right? I countered. I didn't know the first thing about the guild's internal business affairs. Fair point, I suppose, Willem admitted. Are you hungry at all? We were just eating, I asked. Oh. Set a portion aside for me, did you? I won't say no to that. I served a plate of fish and chips to Willem as well, with a beer to accompany it, of course. It randomly occurred to me that he probably would have described it as ale, since that was the standard term in this world. A moment later, he proved me right. What is this ale? It's incredible, Willem exclaimed after his first gulp of beer. I just happened to stumble across it somewhere, I vaguely replied. Well, there aren't many things I'd take over getting the chance to drink booze like this, Willem said. He was apparently quite the alcohol lover, and seemed to be in a fantastic mood all of a sudden. Now, I can tell that these are potatoes, but what are those other things? Oh, just try one and see for yourself. They're good, trust me, especially if you dip them in that white sauce. Willem followed my instructions, grabbing a piece of fried ice dragon, dipping it into the tartar sauce, and taking a bite. Ooh, that is something, all right. Delicious. What is it? Fish? Ice dragon, actually. For a moment, Willem froze solid. He very slowly set his partially eaten piece of dragon meat down on his plate, then took a long, deep breath. I think I misheard you. It almost sounded like you said this was ice dragon meat. Yeah, that's right. It's every time with you, I swear. Every time. Why? Why are you putting the blame on me? I'm not the one who demanded we have ice dragon for dinner tonight. You can thank those four for that. Does that mean you don't want any more of it? I asked. No, I'll eat, Willem sighed. He took a moment to psych himself up, then started stuffing his face. Just another reminder that expecting common sense from you is always a mistake, I guess. I think I'm finally starting to internalize that, he commented between bites. Come on, really? I said. All I'm saying is that nobody who has a Fenrir and an ancient dragon as his familiars could ever be totally normal. You're barely any better than they are, really. That's exactly why the king's being so careful about how he deals with you, and exactly why all those nobles should be following his example. Trying to make them understand that is a losing battle, though. Come to think of it, the king and queen came to watch the butchering process, didn't they? I saw them arrive, but I didn't even notice when they left. They're busy, couldn't stick around forever. They headed back to the palace while we were draining the Leviathan's blood. Oh, really? I'd almost expected them to come over and demand that I hand over my magic swords, but apparently, I shouldn't have bothered worrying after all. I bet you were expecting them to ask for a magic sword, weren't you? Willem asked, rather perceptively. I mean, yeah, I admitted. There was some talk along those lines, from what I heard, but the king himself shut it right down. Seems he's pretty dedicated to making sure you're not driven off to some other nation. Some of the other nobles had apparently persisted, claiming that all the king had to do was make sure that I couldn't flee the country, and the king had responded by reminding them of the sort of company I kept. If keeping a leash on a man with a Fenrir and an ancient dragon at his beck and call was that easy, my job would be much simpler than it is, he'd apparently scoffed. Oh, and he also gave a preemptive order that nobody was to try to pressure you into handing over any of the Leviathan's materials, Willem added. That had apparently been the Queen's decision, in part. In her words, any attempt to lay claim to it could earn our whole nation the wrath of his familiars, and that is a storm we simply cannot weather. In other words, to do so would amount to nothing less than an act of outright treason, and I'm sure none of you are foolish enough to commit such a crime. Are you? Why yeah, honestly, I can't deny it. If Fel and Gun wanted to, they really could blow the whole country away. Nice work, Miss Queen. So, that's the long and short of it, Willem said. The king's keeping anyone who might hassle you in check, though he isn't doing anything to help us with the hordes of apothecaries and merchants beating at our door. Have there really been that many of them? I asked. More than you could know. They've been coming at us in droves, demanding the chance to make a deal. It's not even the guild's Leviathan to sell yet, not that that'd ever stop them from asking for it anyway, Willem explained with an irritated frown. I got the sense he was pretty fed up with all those business people. Hell, we haven't even decided what we'll be buying from you to begin with. Wait. You're not buying the whole thing? I asked. I really only need the meat. The rest is totally up for grabs. Are you insane? That'd bankrupt the whole guild, and drive us into debt afterward. Wait, really? It's that bad? Don't worry, though. Bram's made it pretty clear that he'll be buying as much of it from you as we can possibly manage. Well, that's good to know, at least. I wouldn't know what to do with the blood and guts and whatnot, so giving it back to me would feel like a waste. Maybe I can give some to the king and Earl Langridge if there's too much of it left over in the end. And maybe I'll have Sway make some elixirs out of anything I still have after that.